now and then, horror films attempt to do a little bit more than simply scare you with a few cheap jump scares. Sometimes they attempt to get a little bit smarter by implementing important messages hidden within the context of a really well-made horror film. A lot of you might immediately think about Jordan Peele's laundry list of horror films mixing ideas such as racism with horror. I personally often think about the film It Follows, blending horror with a message about the horrors of STDs, which sounds really silly, but in all actuality was extremely effective. Turns out Talk to Me is another film that fits quite nicely into that subcategory of horror. Let's get cracking. Talk to Me ultimately follows a group of teenagers that somehow run into an embalmed dead person's hand that has a connection to the other side. When they hold this hand and say the magic words, "Talk to me," they gain the ability to interact with spirits, which they can't help but do day after day after day, regardless of the fact that the more they do that and the longer they hold on, the more peril they put themselves and those around them in. As I had mentioned before, this is a film that fits into a certain niche of horror films that are in large part a message on something that's much more relevant and relatable to a lot of different people. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of talk about a dead embalmed hand that connects us to those trapped in the afterlife. But it's really how these people interact with it and how addicted they end up being to the entire experience. I thought more than once that I have seen this movie before, and in a big way I have. There is one film that came out decades ago that this film falls quite a few beats from, and that is Flatliners, a film not about a dead person's hand, but rather a group of people that get addicted to temporarily dying, being pain-free, and potentially seeing loved ones again. In both Flatliners and in Talk to Me, you're talking about a group of people getting addicted to something that they don't really understand, ultimately putting themselves and those around them at risk because it's that important to them. Both films feature a snowball effect where things just kind of get worse and worse and worse as these people want to get in deeper and for longer periods of time. And both films can be compared to the all too familiar and real effects of drug abuse. Whether or not you remove the element of the paranormal in this film, most audiences should be able to pick up on how these people look and the desperation in their faces when they want to do it again and again and again because they're essentially experiencing withdrawal symptoms. In that regards, this film's kind of brilliant. That being said, it did begin to dawn on me that the brilliance of the film is mostly seen in the first act and any time the hand can be seen. The rest of the film, however, after our core selection of characters touch the hand, the film then transitions into much more of a typical ghost story. The characters no longer need to hold the hand as a clutch to see and interact with the spirits. The spirits just show up whenever after that point. The aspect of the film that feels like a bunch of people fiending for drugs and how that negatively affects those around them, that's constant, but the actual gimmick of the film, or at least how it was introduced and the reason why we watched it in the first place, is more or less abandoned throughout the rest of the film, and that is when things stopped working for me as much. It's still made well enough, and the acting is still some of the best performances that I've seen in horror recently, but the actual narrative, not as strong as it's introduced. Also, I know that it probably doesn't matter so much, but it's never really explained where this hand even came from, or how they figured out you have to go through all these different steps in order to talk to the ghost. You gotta hold on to it a certain way. Then you have to say, "Talk to me." And then I guess it's kind of optional, but for the whole experience, you can also say, "I let you in," etc. I want to find out who the wise guy was that found all of that out. Now because of that, the introduction of this film I thought felt slightly rushed and was a little bit confusing. The less explanation there, the more it does feel like a cheap gimmick. It does depend on who you are. I'm sure for a lot of people you don't really care all that much. Me personally, I love haunted lore. I could have used a little bit of that in this film. Overall, I found that this film is pretty decent, and I consider it something that I would have a hard time forgetting. It's not my favorite horror film of the year, but it was smart enough to come up with a gimmick that stands out and a message that's pretty darn important. I scored Talk to Me a B letter grade. Final overall score of 78%, 78 out of 100 possible stars. If you're a fan of horror films, I think that this is going to be a good movie to watch. Far too many movies these days follow the same beats, and Talk to Me feels pretty fresh overall, even though it could be compared to something like Flatliners. But what about you guys though? Have you seen Talk to Me? Let me know in the comment section down below if it reminded you of Flatliners or any other films that you've seen. And as for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit the like, subscribe button, and bell to be notified when I come out with my next review. And until next time, peace out!